So I'm currently working on a video about William Afton, and in the process of gathering information about him, I ended up asking myself a particular question. And the more I thought about the answer to that question, the more I realised that it had the potential to change how we perceive some of the events in the FNAF storyline completely. So today I wanted to make a shorter video talking about this question, how I came to it, and what it may mean for the story of FNAF. The question came to me when I was reading through the Fazbear Fright's book Bunny Call. I'll go into greater detail in the video on William itself, but suffice it to say that this book is all about William and who he is as a person. The two stories relevant to today's video are Bunny Call and In the Flesh. Bunny Call tells of Bob, a father who resents the lack of control his family and professional lives leave him with. He enacts revenge on his family by sending Ralpho, presumably a man in a rabbit costume, to prank them by waking them up loudly at 5 a.m. In the Flesh tells of Matt, a game developer bitter about his divorce and, in general, quite resentful towards women. Matt is designing a VR game featuring Springtrap, and after losing to the game, he enacts revenge by making Springtrap live out thousands of virtual lives stuck in a maze with no way of escaping. In both of these stories, things obviously go wrong, and while Bob sees the error of his ways and gets a happy ending, Matt does not. If you know, you know. Both of these stories show an angry, resentful man using a rabbit-like object to take out his frustrations on the world. This clearly mirrors William's experience of taking out his anger on the world using the Spring Bonnie costume. Again, this is something I'll explain more in my video on him. But as it turns out, looking at these stories in an isolated way was too narrow of a view. These stories are best interpreted through the themes of the Fazbear Frights books as a whole, and the biggest recurring theme is emphasised to us through the Stitch Wraith stingers. In these stories, we learn that the Stitch Wraith, a possessed robot, was made by Dr. Phineas Taggart, who was experimenting with harnessing emotional energy, particularly strong negative emotions like agony. By imbuing the endoskeleton of the Stitch Wraith with agony collected from infected objects, as well as the spirits of Jake and Andrew from a doll's head and a battery pack respectively, Phineas gives the robot a life of its own. This speaks to the overarching theme of the series: negative emotional energy giving inanimate objects their own form of life. So, with this theme in mind, we can return to Bunny Call and In the Flesh and interpret their stories more literally. Bob and Matt's negative emotional energy, their rage and resentment in this case, gave Ralpho and VR Springtrap their own form of life. So what if, instead of just being a reflection of how William used the Spring Bonnie suit to act out his anger, these stories are trying to tell us that William's anger passed on to the suit itself and gave the suit life. Think about it for a second. What is it that makes the Spring Bonnie suit so unique? It's one of only 2 Springlock suits. The Springlock suits are special because they can be worn by employees as costumes, or they can function independently as animatronics. If William used the suit to go after the children in, and some of his rage was imbued into the suit, is it possible that when he exits the suit and the suit is put into animatronic mode, it is able to independently carry out horrible acts? Remember, the animatronics don't always need a physical body present inside them in order to be possessed. There's obviously the Stitch Wraith, which is possessed by 3 different entities, none of whom's bodies were physically attached to any of its components. The puppet only lies next to Charlie when she goes on to possess it. She doesn't have to be stuffed into it like with the missing children's incident victims. And the Mimic was just half an endoskeleton when Edward unintentionally imbued it with all his rage, agony, and grief, bringing it to life in a gruesomely awful way. These animatronics are able to function and quite often wreak havoc even without the presence of a physical body. So why couldn't the Spring Bonnie animatronic? What makes this idea even more plausible is a repeated question the series seems to be asking. Back when FNAF 4 released, we had the infamous GT livestream where Scott Cawthon gave us the clue, "What is seen in the shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child." This was interpreted by many to mean that the crying child mistook this man being put into a suit as this purple guy killing him. I disagree with this theory, and instead think that what the crying child misunderstood was explained to us in the Silver Eyes. As the tension of the novel rises, 12-year-old Jason sees William, wearing the Spring Bonnie suit, kidnap Carlton, one of Charlie's friends. In a panic, Jason rushes out to Charlie and her friends, shouting, "Bonnie took Carlton." Jason thinks that Bonnie, the animatronic, has taken Carlton, and not realise that it's a man in a suit. So I think this clue from Scott was trying to get us to think that the crying child was scared of the animatronics because he thinks an animatronic killed someone, when it was really a man in a costume. More broadly, I think this clue was trying to get us to question what we're seeing when we look at Spring Bonnie, or Springtrap. It was trying to cement in our minds the idea that we can't tell if this is a man or a robot, and this concept is further emphasized in the official character encyclopedia. The section on Spring Bonnie begins with the quote, "Anyone in there?" and follows up later with the statement, "It's not always clear when a Springlock suit has anyone inside it or not." And what's interesting about this section are the pictures chosen to represent Spring Bonnie. None of them are from the games. These are all art drawn of him, including this one here that is specifically the version of Spring Bonnie shown in Into the Pit. Notice the plastic balls from the ball pit surrounding him. He also has blue eyes here, matching the creature from Into the Pit, the video game, and specifically not matching the other two drawings of Spring Bonnie, which both have green eyes. I point this out because in both the story and the game of Into the Pit, we never get closure on what exactly the creature is. In the game, it certainly doesn't seem human. It has wickedly sharp teeth, its horrendous heavy breathing, its awkward clunky movements. It certainly seems more animal, more primitive than a man in a suit. So what if it isn't? What if it's the Spring Bonnie suit in animatronic mode, brought to life by William's rage and intent on carrying out his desire to kill? I also wonder if it's the rage embedded into the suit that is refusing to let William die just as much as the vengeful spirit, rather than simply being William's own will to live. We see in the novels that William is quite lifeless without the suit, but it invigorates him once he wears it. It's also mentioned in The Flesh that when a truly wicked character is created and lives on in people's minds, some of that immortality is given to the creator themselves. So what if it's the suit that allows William to keep coming back, even when he himself maybe doesn't want to? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm the first to admit that this theory is wild, and because it's so new to me, I'm not overly attached to it, so I don't blame you for disagreeing. I can even argue my own point down in a few ways. Regardless, I do think the series is trying to get us to question if this suit is a man or a robot. And I do think it makes for an interesting story if the suit is able to continue hurting others while in animatronic mode due to William's rage. I think it's an idea we should play with, if only to thoroughly disprove it in the end. And before I sign off, I do want to add in something that came to me after I'd already finished this script. I was rewatching Game Theory's video on the teaser for The Secret of the Mimic. In that video, Tom brings up a quote from Steel Wool design director Brian Freermuth that was posted at the time of the teaser's release. "The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones." While there's many ways to interpret this, and while the quote is probably meant specifically for Secret of the Mimic, I think it adds to my argument for this video. Even as William leaves the suit and potentially dies, the evil that he introduced to the world does not. It continues to live after him, perpetuating the horrible acts he has done for years on end. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.